My Vitamix blender.
Hi. Nobody ever sits in the front row at these things. It's so weird. Caroline will. I will after. I'm Mila. It's nice to meet all of you. Saw some of you on the way in, and hopefully we'll get to chat more. I'm a new member of the Rangle.io team, and we're running this and 3 other community meetups in the city, React.js, AngularJS, TO, and PhoneGap, which is actually coming up soon, so you can chat to me after if you're interested in any of those. Before we get started, just some housekeeping stuff. The bathrooms are out this door to your left, to your right, and down the hall. What else? Oh, yes. There's a e-newsletter sign up, which the lovely Glafira has on an iPad out back. So if you're interested in industry news, career opportunities, that sort of thing, we encourage you to sign up. Speaking of career opportunities, this gentleman in the pink shirt is Ruth Jolly. He is the VP of HR at Rangle, so have a chat with him and a beer afterwards if you're looking. We have 2 great talks tonight. I'm really excited about them. We have Mike Costanzo, who's our lead UX designer here at Rangle.io, who's starting off with how to eat a whale, already the first slide. It's amazing. Then we have Lanny Geffen. I'm going to read from this just so I don't forget anything. Lanny is a creative leader and design thinker who's crafted products used by millions of people every day, from financial websites that trade billions to media apps that broadcast around the world. He works with global brands to discover new opportunities to enhance and expand their business with interactive experiences. This talk today will provide us with some easily remembered behavioral economics principles to improve the success and conversion rates of experiences that you're all designing. And yeah, with that, I guess I should have ended with your bio.
Nah, you did a good enough. That's enough.
Over to Mike. So thank you all again for coming, and we'll chat after. Actually, if there's any other community news, I'll open up the floor to whoever has news and would like to say something. Okay, thanks all for coming. Over to Mike.
Hi, thank you. Is my voice projecting well enough to the back there? Yeah, good. Okay. So, as Mila said, I'm lead UX designer here at Rangle.io. My talk is going to be on building your UX process one bite at a time. When I decided to take on the challenge of doing this talk, I had this idea in my head. I was watching a documentary with my 4-year-old son about sea life, and there was this whale that had been hit by a boat, and the sharks were slowly eating it, and it was this weird thing to watch with your 4-year-old, but he was into it, and but I was thinking a lot about I don't want to get too high-minded here, but I think about my life and how I got to where I was, how I became a UX designer, and some of it seemed kind of strange, but it kind of had an analog to how these sharks were eating this whale, that it was this giant thing that they were biting chunks out of. So I had that idea in my head for a long time, and I just wrote it down, like how to eat a whale, and I had that in a markdown file for ages. And then Mila said, "Do you want to talk?" And I said, "Sure." And I'll get into why I did that after, but it's part of this. So I started to think, agile XD UX in an agile environment. It's like this. It's this whale, right? It can be this giant thing, and you have agile that's like, has all this wildness, the energy of a whale, you can imagine, and it's fighting you, and you're just this little person, and how do you possibly do this, and it's kind of made up of all these things, and these aren't even all of them. There's another side of the whale, and there's the top and the bottom, and it's all has these chunks that make up what kind of agile design can be. Everything from user testing, user interviews, information architecture, visual design, right up until HTML and CSS. Rangle.io started as a pretty dev-heavy shop, so we kind of have that DNA, as the core of our business. So, and that's kind of unique. Some of you might come from a place that's kind of founded from a design perspective, and then developers get brought on to make the things down the road. But I think that, whichever way it starts, from a design or from a development perspective, that kind of carries through as the company grows. But anyway, so our idea of UX designer is pretty broad, and it's something that I've been wrestling with for quite a while. I think maybe it's too broad in some cases. But anyway, a lot of our designers can go from, say, visual design to coding up the website, and I'm really trying to push now to do more UX research to kind of get to be like, true UX designer, rather than the kind of catch-all phrase that UX designer has become over the last 2 years. So anyway, we're going to eat this whale somehow, bite by bite. So one of the things I've realized as I was kind of sitting there contemplating, thinking about how am I going to talk about this, is like, I just started to think, what did I do? How did it happen? How did I, through kind of some meandering happenstance, become lead UX designer at Rangle.io? It seems kind of weird even when I say it. But what happened was, even before I was hired here, I was reading, I was theorizing, and I was reading some more. And then I was also learning to code, at a pretty, a decent level. I was learning Git. I was learning about Angular a bit. I was, learning SAS, all these things. So this is really, I think, important. You always have to be learning, and if you're not, you're probably in the wrong business, because everything changes so fast. So how many of you are working in a agile environment right now? So a little less than, well, you don't count, you work here. That's a little less than half. How many of you are actually designers? So, okay, not a ton, or half maybe. Okay, so anyway, is everyone super clear on what lean, agile, and waterfall is? Yes? No? I'm not super clear on it even. So if no is the answer, I'm just going to give a little history, because I think if you don't know the battlefield, it's hard to suss how you're going to build your process, right? So, these guys are thinking, what is agile, what is lean? And the waterfall is saying, don't forget about me. So waterfall is kind of, it's the enemy in a lot of ways in a software kind of environment under certain circumstances. I'm glad Dean, our COO, is here. If I get hung up on anything, he'll be here to save me, right, Dean? Yeah. Okay, so, waterfall, you start with business requirements. They get handed off to design. The designers take those requirements. They design something. That gets handed off to the development team. They develop, QA tests it, and then you go into maintenance mode. This is kind of the traditional waterfall process. The problem with this is, you're just, the idea is that you're just throwing it over the fence once you're done with it. So you finish the designs, the developers get it, and, good luck, right? See you in 6 months or 2 years or whatever the case may be. So, there's a lot of problems with how this works with software. As time's progressed, software has just become more and more pushing towards an agile process just in its own kind of form factor. It went from being this thing you bought in a store in a box, every few years, to what we have now, where you're getting updates all the time. You open the application between one day and the next, and you see there's a new feature there. Slack, which is a product we use extensively here, just launched a new feature to switch between channels easily. It literally was today. I noticed it. I was like, this is great, right? So this is not going to work in that environment. So this is where kind of agile comes in. So agile is kind of this more circular, quick turnaround feedback approach where you have an idea, you design and develop it, kind of in the best case scenario in tandem together. You release it, you get feedback, and then you start all over again. If the feedback's good, great. If the feedback's bad or something skewed, you go back and reevaluate. But you're working as a tight team and getting feedback. So this is generally how we work here. We use another methodology called Scrum, which kind of is a process revolved around this. But generally, this is how it works. You're getting tight feedback loops, and you're delivering in short cycles. We usually do 1 week sprints here. So every week, the goal is to get something that is testable as a prototype or as a product, right? And this kind of, just to make sense of it, this is, I found this really useful. It's money and risk. These are like the business values, right? With waterfall, you have all this risk at the end, and you have the money increasing as you go, and Lord knows if it's going to make it or break it. With agile, you have more risk up front, and you're de-risking as you go along, and you're adding to the product as you go and building it up, and you're spending basically the same amount of money, in theory, along the way. So you have a lot more consistency. So this is kind of the business value around between waterfall and agile, I think. Dean, nod, yeah, good. So Agile Manifesto was created in 2001? Sorry, I knew there was a 1 in there somewhere. So the Agile Manifesto is kind of for, what's the term? Mantras?
There's 12 principles.
What's that? Principles? No, the principles are something else. Anyway, 4 things. And values, there you go. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools. That's one of the key values. So being in teams that are tight-knit, talking with them, not handing stuff off to an offshore team that you don't have any contact with. That's kind of the logic of that, right? Working software over comprehensive documentation. We kind of went into that a bit, but you're not starting with all these documents that are handed off to the designer. They design it. You're collaboratively trying to figure out what it is you want to build, and that can change over time. And along the way, you want to deliver working software so you can actually test that and see if you're going in the right direction and make a change quickly if you can. Not make a change a year from now, make a change a week from now. Customer collaboration over contract negotiations. So something we do here at Rangle is keep the contracts very simple and straightforward. Collaborating closely with the customer. We often have the customer in the office with us, sometimes sitting right beside us, and we're meeting with them all the time and talking with them and running stuff through them. It's not something that I have to go through an intermediary or 3 or 4 intermediaries to get some kind of answer and wait days to come back. If I need something answered, I can contact them right away. At the very least, I can hit them up on Slack or make a phone call even. And then responding to change over following a plan. So again, this is like, if things aren't working, what's not working? We decide as a team to change course. The product owner often says, has the kind of veto around that. But, you're making yourself flexible to change. So there's some links. I'll post these slides up so you guys can have, I have a bunch of resources here along the way. And this is just it restated more plainly. And then what it states also is that we value the items on the left. We value the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So it's not like a all or nothing thing. It really is dependent on how much clarity you have in the project. There's a lot of factors that sway the balance there. But generally, we try to push towards the left. And these are the principles kind of Dean was alluding to. Customer satisfaction being the highest priority, welcoming change, frequent delivery of software, business people and developers cooperating daily, build projects around motivated people, face-to-face conversation is best, progress measured by working software, sustainable development, pace, continuous, technical excellence, simplicity of the art of maximizing the amount of work done is essential, self-organizing teams, and regular reflection and adaptation. So one of the things that we do is after our sprint, we have retrospectives, and we talk about what went well, what didn't go well, how can we adjust to make things move along more fluidly. And then there's lean, and lean and agile often get kind of just lumped into the same thing, and there's a lot of overlap there. So lean came from the idea of lean manufacturing. Like if you're thinking Ford, Toyota was a big proponent. So there's a long history there. But so it's about eliminating waste, building quality in, creating knowledge, deferring commitment. That means like not deciding until the latest point possible. And that can seem a bit odd, but the logic of that is that you know more later as the project progresses. And the more you know, the better you can make a decision. So deferring that commitment actually is beneficial in the long run. But it can create this kind of weird uneasiness. A lot of this stuff goes against our typical waterfall methods that are like, I think, ingrained in a lot of business. So even from a developer perspective, I know there's a lot of uneasiness. You know, it's easier in some way to just do your job in a waterfall environment if you just want to put your head down and kind of be a drone in the machine. But I don't think that doesn't appeal to me. I would hope that doesn't appeal to many of you. So we want to be engaged, right? You deliver fast, you respect people, and you optimize the whole. So that's generally lean. So this is quite a long quote, but it's quite well articulated. This blog post here, Agile versus Lean, yeah, what's the difference, is really good. I suggest any of you or all of you to go and read it. It's a nice, concise kind of overview of that. But it kind of just restates the same thing. Multitasking is another big factor that I'll maybe touch on a bit later. Part of the reason I've been pushing against the UX designer as a catch-all from everything from front-end code to user research, visual design, and all these things in the middle is that the context switching can be really hard, especially between writing code and designing and visual design. And I think that plays into the idea of lean multitasking, right? Whenever you're doing the context switching, it can be really hard. If you're doing it the same day, like it can be very challenging mentally. So, yeah. And this is just another little diagram that I think provided a lot of clarity for me. So you have the known and the unknown access. The more things are known in both the business requirements and the technology solution, the more waterfall becomes a viable solution. The more you go towards unknown in both cases, you start to move into where agile becomes a more reasonable solution. And then when everything is unknown in both technology and solutions, you get into kind of a lean startup agile mode. I don't want to go into that too heavily, but I really like this. I thought it was quite clear. The more you know, I think the more clear this becomes. So there's also a lean manifesto. Again, they kind of took the ideas of the agile manifesto, applied it to lean, collaborative design over designing on an island. That's something we try to do here. I am no authority on design. I mean, I have a lot of knowledge around it, but developers, scrum masters, product owners can come up with just as valid a solution as I can, and that happens often. And it's not a genius in the corner trying to come up with this amazing piece of software. It just doesn't work that way. Solving problems over designing the next cool feature. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Applying appropriate tools over following a rigid plan. Again, getting into retrospective. We're always constantly evaluating the tools we're using here. Nothing's really set in stone. If a better tool comes along, by all means, we're very open to bringing it up. Right now, I'll get into the tools we've kind of settled on here, but that's important. KPIs over undefined success metrics. This is something I've been really focused on lately, and I want to push really hard in our company right now. Making design decisions based on actual data, right? And that can be difficult, but I think it's really important, or else you're just getting into ideas of taste. Is it this blue or that blue, or is it supposed to be red, right? And that, anyone who's a designer, I think, will understand the frustration around that kind of stuff. That's not even really design. That's just taste, and they're really two different things. And early customer validation over releasing products with unknown end user value. That goes back into the feedback loop. So take this for what you will. It's not as prevalent as the Agile manifesto, but I think there is quite a lot of value here. So. And just getting back into learning, this book was very influential for me. I don't know how many of you have read it, but if you haven't, you should. Lean UX, Jeff Gotholf, I don't know. He works at a company called Neo now. Really smart guy. This book is just chock full of stuff that will make you cringe about your process and how awesome you want it to be based on this process. When I read it, I came into work the next day. I was like, okay, I know what we're doing wrong. We just got to do all these things. We got to do usability testing every sprint and da-da-da-da-da. And it's strange. You find, I realized very early on, this is where the kind of whale came into play, that you can't just do it all in one shot. You can't start from 0 or 1 and go all the way to 100. It's just, there's so many things working against you in some ways. Even here in an agile, lean software company, it was challenging because you have clients who come in and they say, oh yeah, we want agile, we want software, we want to deliver it fast, we want to see it all the time. But we know our users. We know we have these personas we made up. We have all these features we want. We just want it fast, really, is what we want to do. But we want good UX, too. So if you can make the UX good, that would be awesome. And that was really frustrating. But I'll kind of delve into that a little bit more. But anyway, this is a wicked place to go. Rocket Surgery Made Easy. This is like, everyone will recommend this. But this is awesome. Delves into usability testing in a really manageable way. Steve Krug. Interviewing users, this is something I recently dove into. We did some user interviews around a client project that had a very clearly defined end user, and it was an end user I didn't know a lot about. They had personas. I wasn't sure about some of the things they proposed, so I was like, perfect, let's do some user testing and validate some of this stuff. And it's already starting to pay dividends. So that was pretty cool. This is a great book. And I'll throw this one out as a kind of oddball choice. It's not UX focused necessarily, but Ogilvy on advertising. David Ogilvy, he's a very famous. What's the term? What's that? Marketer. Advertiser. I mean, he's famous for the Volkswagen ads of the stark white text on the, he had basically a layout that he used for like all of his clients.
One, and then it's like the tiny little Volkswagen.
Yeah, stuff like that. So anyway, he was really very early on into user research. So he had this part of the book is the 18 miracles of research, and this one's pretty great. Research can settle arguments. When Lord Geddes became chairman of British Travel, he argued that we should feature trout fishing in advertising until I pulled out a chart showing that fishing interested American tourists less than 49 other subjects we tested. So what I like about this, and I'll get into this later on, is that part of design is about selling your design. When I was more of a graphic designer, I realized very quickly during a presentation of one of my designs that the way you present them is very important. And Chris Pangan, who is a designer and marketing designer here now, is the person that taught me that lesson. I'll go into that story a little bit more. And these are just some online resources. So, UIE is a great resource, aycl.uie.com. There's just tons of amazing videos. It's Jared Spool's company. He's very well-known UX designer. He's been doing it for a long time. I suggest checking that out. Nielsen Norman Group publishes tons of interesting stuff. And then UX Booth, UX Matters, usertesting.com, their blog. There's a lot of great info there. And there's a link at the bottom where they go even in more depth. But these are the kind of things that I'm always checking out. So I thought I'd share them with you. So this idea of the enemy of mine enemy is my friend. So the idea that designers and developers are somehow at odds. I've been lucky here that all the developers are actually really smart and interesting people, and they actually have a lot of design sense. But you hear the horror stories of design and development, and kind of the enemy of mine enemy is like if you both have. You both have an enemy, and who is that enemy? So you can all be friends, right? So who is the enemy? So waterfall, is that the enemy? Is it like UI like this? I don't think anyone would be super proud of designing something that look like that. Obviously, this is an exaggeration, but you get the point. But maybe something a little closer to this, right? Where like how little thought was put into this. It's amazing, right? But from a user's perspective, it's like, what the hell do I do here? Right? Why is that TO so big? Does that mean Toronto? I don't know. And even the cancel and the OK, they're opposite of the OK and the cancel. It's just, right? But again, this is a slight exaggeration, but we're getting closer to reality here. We've all seen these kinds of things. So I think both designer and developer, this is the enemy. This is the enemy of my enemy, so we can be friends, right? So this is something, we have this discussion group here that I wanted to start up around, thinking about the things we put out into the world and how they kind of reflect back on us. And we call it praxis, and there's some meaning behind that, but I won't get into it. But we had the very first one, we had this kind of thing that solidified out of it is like, be thoughtful and don't make shit, right? That's my mantra right now. I don't want to make anything shitty anymore, ever. That's my goal. It might still happen, but that's my goal. Not that we even have done that here. I think it's amazing how many awesome things we've made and how they're starting to come out into the world now and blossom into other things. Again, we're consultants here, so I'm sure not everyone's in the same space as me. Some of you probably working on products. I don't know. So this is very particular to my process here as a consultant. We're building stuff for a certain period of time, and then after a while, it goes out into the world, and we kind of lose touch of it, right? But I always check back in with clients and say, how's my baby doing? To see how that process is continuing. But it's been pretty successful. But I don't know. This statement just really has a lot of weight for me as a kind of litmus test, right? A litmus test to developers to speak up if they think the process isn't going well. A litmus test for designers to consider everything they're doing, to not make all those terrible things we saw before, to not fall into kind of waterfall, when things start to go south, people kind of revert back to what they know. And even from a product owner perspective, I find that has happened. It takes a strong team to kind of ease the client and make them comfortable with the process. The process of agile is inherently kind of uncomfortable, especially very early on. And again, as you learn more, the comfort builds in as the team starts to gel. So another aspect is, build. I realized very early on when I saw this whale and all these things that I wanted to do that I couldn't do them all. I was actually one person in a team of around 20-ish developers at the time. I was bouncing around from project. I'd be on 2 weeks of a project here, 2 weeks of a project there, back on the other project for a week. A new project would come on. It was interesting, to say the least, but it was a lot of fun. But I realized, I can't do all these things. So it's like, what can I do? And then I came across this UX is not UI. All the things that UX is and what it's typically seen as is interface design and visual design. So we'd have a lot of clients say, yeah, I want it to be great UX, design me great UX, right? What does that mean? So that was frustrating, but another thing I realized that the kind of static mock-ups I was delivering, updating those in an agile environment, getting those out to the team was just impossible. I did a talk on this at the last Agile UX or XD meetup. There's slides available online. Maybe I'll post them up on the message board. But what I settled on was prototyping because that was in my wheelhouse of things I was already doing. I was already kind of heavily in visual design. I was designing wireframes, thinking about the app, trying to get these designs to the dev team so they had something to kind of as a compass to build their product around. So I focused in on prototyping, and it actually turned out to be a good bet. So this was a prototype made in InVision based around a client project we did. None of this is actual code. This is all just static screens that you upload into InVision, and then you can create kind of hot spots and set headers and footers. And you can send this out to a client or a team. They can actually install it on their phone as an application and open it up just like an app. And as you update it, it updates. So you have this one source of truth. Instead of versioning mockups and saying v1.2, 1.3, 2.1, which I was doing, trying to show interaction through, hands and their direction that they were going. This just like takes it to a whole nother level. And this is quite high fidelity. That got me into trouble in some places, but I think the fidelity should kind of come out of the prototype. We've had projects where we've just drawn the UI out with a pencil, took photos of it, put it on InVision, and hooked it up, and you didn't gain much more outside of knowing what the visuals are from a style guide perspective, from going from pencils to this. Really, you can get a lot of value out of it. So this was a big win. And then what this can do is it can lead to rapid feedback. So you can go out, test this against users. You can test this against even the product owner. Is this what you wanted? Is this what you expected? And get feedback and go back into the design and keep iterating in the same way as the kind of agile process. So these are the tools that we've kind of settled on, as I alluded to before. So a pencil is great. Sketch is an app I'm using almost exclusively now in InVision. So this might remind you of something. Triforce, right? But these make a really powerful combo. Sketch integrates with InVision. You're always in Sketch. It pushes up automatically as you update. As long as you keep the naming structure of your artboards the same, they update onto InVision. If you have them, if you have the hotspots hooked up, there's nothing more for you to do. It's really powerful. Sketch does have its quirks. It's gotten better. I was a hardcore Illustrator fan, and it took me a while to transition. But the limitations of the UI in Sketch really help you design faster and get out of the kind of pixel perfection that I think is falling to the wayside. So this is the tool set we use most. And again, the pencil has a lot of power in that. So what I realized is you just got to go deep into something. Go deep into that one thing, learn all about it, become an expert at that one aspect, and then you can integrate it into your process. And then you just start again. So you're iterating on your process in the same agile manner. Again, this is how I did it. Part of it was just out of sheer desire to survive in this environment. But I think there was a logic to it. And again, you know, as I'm reading this even now, I'm like, oh, that's kind of iterative and agile. I didn't even think about that. So interesting. So again, this is where I'm really pushing hard now, is measuring. So the idea that everything is a hypothesis. This comes from the Lean UX book that I was talking about later. When I heard that, I was just like, yes, that is what it is. So I just basically don't say anything else to clients at this point. If they come at me with anything, I'm like, oh, that's a good hypothesis. And so far it's working. So I'll report back later on the success, but currently it's cool. So again, this is from that book. Each design is a proposed business solution, a hypothesis. Your goal is to validate the proposed solution as efficiently as possible by using customer feedback. So you can get a sense of the lean manufacturing methodology seeping through into this statement quite a bit. It's important. So if you don't validate your work against real users, you might be building junk. This is something I kind of realized. Fast, lean, agile, junk. So this kind of aligns with my shit statement. I don't want to build junk. I don't want to build shit. I want to build awesome stuff. So I want to validate, and I don't want it to be about me liking blue or red or purple or pink. You know, what is the user doing in reaction to those things? That's what I'm interested in. This is something we've done recently too. This is at MailChimp, but we did a similar process around personas. So I started to realize, oh, personas are great. They can align a product owner or a client to kind of think about their potential customers. You'd be surprised at how little thought can go into this. So when I started doing the first persona work with the client, they're like, oh, this is awesome. Yeah, I'm into this. But then I kind of realized, like, we're just kind of making up stuff. And again, the Lean UX book goes into this a bit. There's also a video session workshop that you can get to around that book. So anyway, on the left, the ideal user. This was created by MailChimp's team based on interviews they did with their actual team on what they thought the ideal MailChimp user was, right? Power user, resourceful, control freak, cool, techie, all these things. When they went out and evaluated who the real users were, they were from nonprofit space. I forget all, like they were just not of the ilk that they thought. But they used this as a measurement, which was interesting too. What they wanted to take their actual users and the model that they wanted to bring them up to as an ideal solution. So what could they do to make them a power user, a control freak, cool, techie, all these things if they weren't, right? So that was interesting. Again, validating prototypes, usability testing. This is a rig that you can set up for about $50. The camera itself is color HD or HD color. It's on Amazon, 49 bucks. Chip bag clip and a industrial strength elastic. You can use this to do mobile testing. They're using ScreenFlow to capture it. Again, this is something I'm really interested in pushing hard over the next little while here to get real user feedback and see where they're sticking. And then again, this is another key point I realized quite early on, and the longer and more experience I get, I just think it becomes more and more important. But communication, your job is not just to be a designer. Your job is to create a clear user experience for your team as well. I think that's how I look at it, right? And that comes down to communicating clearly. And I just take it as like, this is my role. This is one of my roles in the team, to really push this as much as I can. That's why the prototyping is important. That's why getting the research, you can do the greatest research. If the devs don't know about it, if the team doesn't know about it, then what's the point, really, right? So Envision, again, has a commenting feature. This is like a big sell. There are a lot of prototyping tools. I don't work for Envision, but this is what we settled on. One of the things is you can comment directly on the mockups. So you're getting out of email. Anytime I can get out of email, I'm happy. So anything that gets me there, I'm going to investigate. And then you can kind of tick these off. But if you're going to write email, write good ones. I think the most important is like the last two. Check your tone and proofread, right? I don't know. That's just me, but I think it's important. A lot of miscommunication has happened in my career just through email. It's really hard to get context out of it. So, what about actually talking to people? Like real humans. So this is our, express yourself thoughtfully. Listen and be receptive. Sketch out your ideas and laugh, but don't be a jerk. Now, you'd be surprised at how hard these can be to actually practice in an agile team. But I think they're really important. If the team dynamic breaks down, you are in a lot of pain. And you will blame everyone from the product owner to the process, and really, in its truest sense, it's about the communication and the team gelling. If that doesn't happen, doesn't matter what process you're in, it's going to fail. Or it's going to lead to something poorly made. So again, Jared Spool, UIE, he had this post about redesigning the design process. I felt this was very apt. The role has changed from running studies to the team's understanding of their users. So that's my job, I feel, at this point. Out of respect for my team, out of respect for the idea of making things that are great, I really want to break down the barrier between me as a designer and a developer and a scrum master and whatever the roles you have, right? This is about all of us coming together to build this thing. Without communication, lean and agile methods don't stand a chance of success. And I don't know, that's pretty true. And then this is another aspect, is kind of the idea of learning to sell it. And I kind of alluded to this before, but this is something I learned from Chris Pangan. Thank you, Chris, for embarrassing me that one time and never again. But if you do this, you're not going to win anyone over. This is a redesign I did of the branding for the company. If I presented it in this way, no one would be too excited. And I kind of did this one time, actually, in reality. And another designer did this as well. And then Chris came along, and he had it like mocked up on the side of a bus. He took photos of the site, put it into places where it would actually be. We didn't stand a chance. From far away, you couldn't even see what the hell we were doing. That moment stuck with me forever, and I'll never forget it. And I think there's something along the lines of selling UX, right? So as I went through this process of explaining where the branding was, how the airplane is a little overused, getting into my idea of the flag, the history of flags, nautical flags, history of flags in software, where the triangle kind of developed, mocking it up in these kind of beautiful things on laptops, on the side of a building. It might seem ridiculous. Part of me thought it was ridiculous. And then I realized if you're relying on someone to imagine what your idea is on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, you're just what. And I think there's some analog to selling your UX practice. Oh yeah, on the moon too. Why not? So, and this is something I don't have a lot of clear definition on. I've been thinking about this a lot. But this idea of having empathy towards your client, right? You can blame the client. They don't want to, they think they know their users. They think this, they think that, and then I've really been trying to get my head into like, why do they think these things? Why are they so afraid to do this stuff? One thing is they're afraid to spend the money on these things that they don't know about, right? You're the expert. You can't assume that they know that usability testing is going to improve their software. So you really got to work to put yourself in their head and understand, why are they pushing back on this? How can I look at their pain points in the same way? How can I design the experience for them from a business sense to kind of sell the process? I don't have a lot of answers around this. If any of you want to talk about this later, I'd love to. But this is something that's I've kind of been thinking about lately. And then be an expert. Fake it till you make it. I don't love the fake it till you make it, but it's kind of true. I did my first Web Unleashed at FITC around rapid interactive prototyping. I had probably a month more knowledge than most people in the audience. I took this talk now without really much of a subject. I just had a bunch of ideas floating in my head. What this does is it forces you to think about these things on a deeper level, forces you to externalize them. And I realize that that's really important. Can it be scary as hell? Can you have a lot of anxiety around looking like an idiot? Hopefully I haven't today. But write, discuss, present, externalize your thoughts is a great way to participate in the community and test your ideas. So, there's a great community around UX design, around software, around startups in this city. Get out there. Don't be afraid. Force yourself to speak about the process. You'll be surprised at how much you know. This is something I realized when I did that talk. I was like, oh, is everyone already doing this? You read all the blog posts about all the best designers, and they're talking about prototyping. You're thinking like, this is old hat, or like everyone's using Git, everyone's using Angular or Agile even, and then you realize like, no, it's a real mixed bag, and you'll be surprised at how much you know. And then there's Dean. I take these words. These are also words that have really struck for me. We will improve iteratively and incrementally, my friend. That's how you eat a whale. Thank you.
If any of you are interested in talking at one of these meetups, you can message me on the meetup page or email me, Rangle.io. I'd love to have you talk. While we get Lanny set up, you can have like a quick bathroom break. Told you where the bathrooms are, if you want to get a drink. I don't know if there's pizza left, but there might be. But we'll try to keep this relatively quick, and thank you again so much, Mike.
Hi, testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. You guys all set? All right. Are we good for sound, Matt? Great. So Western society has operated by one dogmatic belief for hundreds of years, and that's that we are rational economic actors. We are motivated to make money, and we are averse to losing it, and we make our choices according to that model. As such, let's say I want to get drivers to stop from speeding. I would put up a speeding sign about their speed limit, and next to it I might put up a fine. If you're caught speeding, I'll charge you $100. I may even put up some digital signage so that they can see their current speed relative to the speed limit. What's interesting to note, however, if alternatively I create a digital sign that gives them a smiley face if they're obeying the speed limit and a frowny face if they're speeding, drivers are up to 60% more likely to obey the speed limit. In fact, it gets a little bit further. Doctors are 34% more likely to recommend a surgery if they're presented with a survival rate instead of the death rate, even though it's effectively the exact same number. Google experienced this recently because what they wanted to do was increase water usage amongst their employees and reduce soda and sugar drink beverage intake. They were astonished when all they did was move the water bottles to eye level, and it accounted for a 47% uptake in water consumption. All of these facts make us wonder, are we in fact irrational? In the last 50 years, we've made more progress than in the previous 500 years to understanding how our mind works. And what we've learned is not that we're irrational, it's that we are predictably irrational. It turns out that our brains do not like to think. It takes a lot of resources and it's difficult. So wherever possible, we prefer to offload thinking to automated systems who will guide us to the right choice and help us conserve resources. A good analogy of this is think about a pilot who lands his plane at night and all he has to look for are the lights on the runway and follow them in. Our brain works the same way. If we can be on an autopilot and anchor our choices to some guides to help us make the right decision, then we will intuitively follow it and will never even question it. Let me give you an example of it. Which circle is larger and which is smaller? Okay, there's no question that the circle on the left, surrounded by the smaller circles, is very large. And the circle on the right, surrounded by the larger circles, is very small. And that's how our mind works. We don't really know small or large, cheap or expensive until it's anchored or compared to another relative quantity. And this little mechanism has profound implications for how we negotiate and how we choose products. And it turns out that they're the same size. So this is your brain. And recently we formed new understandings of how your brain works. And it's called dual process theory. Let me explain it. Dual process theory says one part of your brain, system one, is your intuition. And this is the part of the brain that is blazingly fast. It makes decisions like that. How does it work? It relies on past history, experience, and rules of thumb. Now, we don't think about this. We don't think about system one, but it's always there. And wherever possible, it actually makes decisions for us. It is fantastic in making decisions for situations we're familiar with. We know it. The decisions it makes are the decisions we feel in our gut. It's kind of like the Homer Simpson part of our brain. System two is the reasoning part of our brain. It's very slow, it's very focused, it's very self-aware, and we have to engage it actively when we want to solve a complex problem that's not familiar to us. It's sort of like the Mr. Spock of our brain. Now, the thing is, we like to think that as rational actors, we're in control of our brain, of our actions and our decisions. But there's this old fable about the elephant rider on the elephant. And the elephant rider sits atop the elephant and would like to think that wherever the elephant goes is where he wanted. But the reality is, if the elephant wants to go somewhere, it doesn't matter what the rider wants. Hence, behavioral economics. How do we actually behave and why? And in particular, how do we make our decisions? Behavioral economics is a multidisciplinary field. It combines economics and traditional theory of the marketplace and psychology, which is now informed by new tools and research like functional resonance imaging, biochemistry, and experimentation. So let me give you an example of how it works and how it affects us. Let's say that we're in the market and we're purchasing a television, and we're comparing two TVs. We'll call it TVA and TVB. Now, TVA has an advantage over TVB. Maybe it's a better refresh rate or higher resolution or something. So when we compare those two options, we're going to say, well, B is the inferior product, so we're going to rule out B and take A. But what happens when we add a third product? What happens when we add a third television? And this television is very much like option B, except maybe there's a scratch in it or a dent in it. It's only slightly inferior. What's interesting is this has a profound impact on us. We're going to say that A is so dissimilar to B and B minus that it's difficult for us to compare. So rather than make the decision like we did before when there are only two products, this time the first thing we're going to do is rule out option A because of its dissimilarity. And now we're going to compare B and B minus. And because B minus is the inferior product to B, this time around we choose B. This has profound impacts for how we should present merchandise, design websites, present carousels and pricing tables, and it also has consequences for how lucky we'll be when we go out to the bar. So, say we go out to a bar and we want to pick up an attractive woman or man, and if we go on our own merits, we face the competition of the person to the left and the right of us, and if we're competing with a hunk or a beautiful person, maybe we don't stand as good a chance as we like. But if we come with a friend of ours who looks like us but only a little less good looking than us, then we stand a much better chance. And if conversation is required and they're a little bit less of a conversationalist than we are, then we stand a much greater chance of connecting with that person. So I know what you guys are thinking at this point in the presentation. You're thinking two things. The first thing you're thinking is, oh shit, how many of my life decisions was I not even aware of with enormous consequence just because of behavioral economics? And the second question, the bigger question you're really thinking about is, who should you take to the bar the next time you go out? Okay, this is the fun and manipulative stuff that our anti-hero Frank Underwood practices all the time. So today, as an introduction to behavioral economics, I'm going to focus on the persuasive side of behavioral economics. How should you think about behavioral economics? Well, I'd like it if you thought of BE as a tool you can use to help your users take action or help them overcome barriers to taking action. The environment in which a person takes action, the environment in which a person makes a decision affects the decision they make. So we can learn from behavioral economics how the environment will help people take the actions they desire. So part one. Imagine you find yourself taking part in an art appreciation study, and you're standing in a room looking at a painting, and next to you is another participant in the study. However, it's all a ruse. What you don't know is you've been set up. The person next to you, whose name we can call him Joe, leaves the room for a few minutes and comes back. And when he comes back, he says, "Hey, I was thirsty. I went to get a Coke. I got one for you too." Well, you're not going to deny it. That's a really nice action, so you're going to say thank you and take it. A couple of moments later, Joe turns to you and goes, "Hey, you know, I'm actually raising funds for a fundraiser by selling raffle tickets. And if I sell enough raffle tickets, I can win $100. Would you be interested in buying some? They're only 25 cents each." So this experiment was conducted, and it was really interesting what happened. First, they did it to a group where Joe didn't give them a Coke, and the uptake was very, very low. But in the second group where Joe gave them a Coke, it was astonishing that people who received the Coke were 200% more likely to buy tickets. But what's more astonishing is that this study took place in the 60s when a Coke was only a dime. And the outcome was that even if it was only a dime, most subjects purchased on average 500% the value of the Coke, even though that Coke was a completely unsolicited gift. This triggered the first mechanism we'll talk about tonight, and that's the first rule of persuasion, which is reciprocity. And the rule states that we feel obliged to repay in kind what another person has provided for us. And this is an exceptionally important rule in evolutionary terms because this is the rule that allowed us as human beings to specialize in our careers and in our jobs. This allowed me to, let's say, become a carpenter while another person became a farmer, and we were ready to exchange resources in kind for our mutual success and benefit. In other words, it's the old adage of you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. But to Frank Underwood, we may actually want to say, give a little so you can take a lot. There's no place where this example is more exemplified than the profound example of the Hare Krishna Society. Now, you may not be familiar with them, but they're centuries old, and they come from Calcutta, India. But our story takes place in America in the 60s, when they would walk around chanting and singing, looking kind of odd and asking for donations. But the average American found them kind of weird and avoided them and wouldn't give them money. And the consequence was that they were running out of money and in serious, serious trouble as an organization. Now, most organizations would hear the feedback from their customers and change what they didn't like about them. But the problem is what people didn't like were tied to religious connotations that weren't so easy to change. So what's a sect to do? Well, the leadership of the Hare Krishna Society came up with something that was an absolutely brilliant solution. And you might have experienced this. Now, instead of just asking for donations, if you happen across the Hare Krishna, they would immediately put a flower in your hand or put one in your lapel, and under no circumstances would they take it back. They would simply say, "This is a gift from us to you, but if you want to make a donation, you're more than welcome to." And the results were astonishing. In no time, they found themselves flush with cash, with the ability to buy property and build temples around the globe and make themselves a much larger organization than they had ever been. There's also two interesting observations that have so many years after this has been practiced. The first is so many people have familiarity with this experience and this technique that if they see the Hare Krishnas there and they know the experience they're going to have, they will go an extraordinary distance to walk around them and avoid them, because even though they know the technique, they feel indebted if they get that flower in their hand, and they'll do anything to avoid it. And the second interesting outcome is most people who get the flower don't actually want it. So what they'll do, like in an airport, the nearest trash bin, they'll throw it out. Well, the Hare Krishnas know this too, and they follow them, go to the trash can, pick up the flower, and recirculate it. They're pretty smart. And you know what? Servers have been applying this for years, because what waiters and waitresses know about this principle is if right before they give you the bill, they give you a mint or a chocolate, they know that your tip will go up. And there was a Canadian study done that proved that the tip may increase as much as 21% just by this little act alone. So how can we, as UX professionals, exercise some of these principles? Well, the first thing we could do is we can reduce attrition by putting friction points later in the experience. Here's an example for Epicurious. They have a fantastic feature that requires voice control, but as we know, you'd need access to the microphone. Now, a lot of apps make the mistake that the first time you install the app and the first time you run it, it begins to ask you all these different things and all of these different prompts for the user, and user attrition goes up. If you hold back a little bit, start giving value, let them use it, let them value your app, and then when they get to the feature, ask for the approval that's necessary, you'll significantly reduce attrition. Another option for your customer is give free gifts along with your purchase. We all love free, and we're going to take advantage of it. Free resources is also really valuable for users. So here we see Help Scout, and they do a lot of things. They give white papers and research and studies, things that can help you in your job that you'll value, and they give it away for free on their blog. Not only does it get you to visit them, it gives you a high brand adherence and trust in their authority. And I love this tool, absolutely. It's free help. And here we have a bra fitting tool from True & Company. Now this does a couple of things. Not only is it helpful and valuable to the users, but you're really, if you're going to use this, you're more likely to purchase a product from them, and the product you purchase is more likely to fit well, so you're going to love them even more. Now, media sites have been struggling for a long time, especially with paywalls. So HBR, Harvard Business Review, does an excellent job on their digital properties, where what they do is rather than hide the content from you and not give you access until you've paid, they actually give you access to their content on a monthly basis. But they limit you to 5 articles. And you can see the counters here and here. And if you've ever used the site, it's a brilliant experience that as you scroll through an article, you'll see a meter fill up until you get to the end of the article, and then that's one article down, and you can keep reading it. But the point is, if you've consumed 5 articles in a month, they've proven their value to you, and they're showing it off, and you're much more likely as a consumer to say, wow, I really value this. Then they give you the offer to subscribe, and you're more likely to convert and to use them. And this is the principle behind Gary Vaynerchuk's book, Jab, Jab, Right Hook. Has anyone read this book? Anyone familiar with it? Okay, the principle is that a jab is content you give away for free that adds value and deepens your relationship with the user. And a right hook is an action that you ask the consumer to take on behalf of your brand. And the principle, the formula is easy. Jab, jab, jab. Give, give, give. And then after giving 3 times, then ask that consumer to do something that's good for your business. There's another interesting twist in the reciprocation principle. Imagine this. Imagine you're sitting at home and there's a knock at the door and a Boy Scout comes to your door and says, hey, I'm raising money for my school. I'm selling chocolate bars for $8. You're going to say, $8 chocolate bar? No, thank you. But before he leaves, he goes, no, that's okay, no problem. I also have a chocolate bar for $2. Chances are very, very high you're going to buy that $2 chocolate. And that's an example of the rejection then retreat strategy. And it invokes the same response as the reciprocity principle, because we actually feel like we're given something just when the other side backs down. And it has 2 interesting effects. The first effect is onus. The sense of responsibility transfers from the person making the request to the person receiving the request when the other side has retreated. Second, that buyer walks away with a higher feeling of satisfaction that they got a good deal. And this has been used in many different ways. For example, TV producers are really famous for using this. When they have to put their scripts in front of censors, what they'll do, just like Gary Marshall, who's the producer in Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, and many others, he tells the story that he knew that his script would not get approved by the censors. So what he does is make a script full of mistakes and full of things he knows the censors will take out, so that he can compromise on the original script he wanted. Kind of a useful tip if you're presenting work to clients. Put in the correct mistakes you want them to take out so that they can keep the actions that might otherwise be controversial. Rejection then retreat also works when we talk about merchandise. So the traditional theory is we have 2 pool tables to show, a $329 model and a $3,000 model. Now traditionally we'll market the cheaper model, try to get people in the store, and go from there. But an interesting study was done. So week 1, what they did is anyone coming in, they did the traditional approach of the trading up approach. So starting at the $329 table and then working their way up from that. That week's average sales were $550. But on the second week, it didn't matter what the customer came in and asked to see. They would right away be taken to the top of the line, the $3,000 table. And then from there, they'd be allowed to shop the rest of the line in terms of declining price and quality. The result of selling down was an average of over $1,000, a 55% increase in average sales. Restaurants know this works as well. And that's why it always pays to add an expensive menu item. So if the top menu item is $60, the next one is $40, more people will opt for the $40 menu item. But if they put a top item that's $100, then more people will purchase the $60 item. So it gets me to think that if you're a car company, they do this all the time. They advertise a beautiful car. I drive a Highlander. They advertise a beautiful car, but what they do is they put what is the starting price up front, and then they always hide what is the price as shown. I've always wondered what would the efficacy be if they switch those numbers. Similarly, I like Banana Republic, and this is one of their website pages, but I was always wondering if you took that big and tall and instead replaced it with a big tout, a big hero image that advertised a coat for $500, and everything beneath it was cheaper, would the average selling price go down? So that's reciprocation. How do you use reciprocation? Well, you need to identify your objectiveness, and it's important to incite feelings of indebtedness by first offering something exclusive and unique to the recipient so that they feel special. Make sure they know it's from you, and also don't give just once. Keep giving to maintain a feeling of indebtedness. And remember that sometimes all you need to do is remind them of what you've done for them in the past. More importantly, how do you defend from reciprocation? Well, before you accept any free gift or free offer, ask yourself, are you going to feel obliged to give the same or more in return? And should you decline so that you don't feel indebted? Part 2. In the 60s, two researchers, Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser, published an astonishing set of data. They asked homeowners to perform a civic service. And the civic service they asked homeowners to do was to put a sign on their lawn that said, "Drive carefully." They then showed homeowners a picture of the sign they intended. And what they saw was a giant sign with terrible topography that looked ugly, that was so large it blocked out almost the entire house. As you would expect, 83% or more of homeowners said, "No way are you putting that on my property." They repeated the same experiment a week later to the astonishing result that 76% of homeowners agreed to that very same sign. So what changed? What changed is a week earlier, another volunteer came by, asked them to perform a civic service, and asked them if they would put a sign on their lawn that said, "Drive carefully," that was only 3 inches, about the size of a business card. And once people agreed to this first request, that same group was much more likely to agree to the second and much larger and, to be honest, kind of ridiculous request. And this came to be known as the foot in the door technique. And it triggers the commitment and consistency principle. And what that principle states is that we have a self-identity, and we put ourselves out there and we make promises or take an action, we will change everything about ourselves to suit this new reality. We don't want to describe ourselves falsely, and we will go to an irrational degree to do it. Our best evidence of what people truly feel and believe comes less from their words than from their deeds. That's the reason why gamblers who bet on a horse feel much better about their choice after they've put money on a horse. It's also the reason behind the IKEA effect. Anyone here have IKEA furniture? They did an interesting study of people who have furniture, and what they found is they measured the satisfaction with furniture and discovered the more labor they put into something, the more people appreciate it. And this is really significant from an evolutionary perspective, because a lot of people say they love my kids, but if I ask them, really, how much are you willing to offer? The price isn't very much. But I, who have invested so much pain and labor and blood into my kids, really value them very, very highly. And this is also the same principle behind cults, especially doomsday cults. There's all sorts of doomsday cults that people become very active in. And the doomsday cult says the world is going to end in June, and they talk and they prophesize. June comes and goes, and what do you find that's astonishing? The people don't leave the cult. They stay in the cult, and in fact, they double down because they made a commitment, and they don't want to appear inconsistent with that commitment, even if it's irrational and it doesn't make any sense. They're ready to double down on their choice. I wonder if it explains this guy. So how can you take advantage of it? Well, it's really interesting. There are services like this called Stick. And what it does is it allows you to declare your resolution and put some stakes against it, even get a referee and support. But the point is that the more effort you put into your resolution, the more public you make your resolution, the more likely you are to keep it. And that's true for diets, bank savings, and everything. The people at Fitbit know this true, and they conducted a really interesting experiment under Monica Ragati, their data scientist. She realized that people were going to sleep at different times, and she wanted to see if she could get a public declaration from them, would it be more effective than the current software strategies and UI strategies they were using. So what she did in her experiment is she sent an email to 40,000 respondents, asked them to make a public commitment by responding to go to bed earlier. And astonishingly, 2/3 of those respondents kept their commitment and changed their behavior. Another great example of the consistency theory is taking advantage of apps like Wishpond. So what Wishpond is, it's an essay writing app. Now, people who use this app, and this is something that you could implement for your own brands, people who write an essay know that in order to be successful, they have to say good things about the product. So they write and they say good things about the product. And as they write more and more, they come to believe in the values that they're writing. And the brand adherence sticks and lasts and has long-lasting benefit for brands. And that's why this has been in the marketer's toolbook for decades. Warby Parker takes advantage of this because what they allow you to do is try before you buy. You can order any 5 frames and have it delivered to your home, and you can return it at no charge. So they know that once the customer opens the box, they feel a commitment. And even though it's frictionless to return, they get very, very few returns. The same is true of Zappos, who has a completely frictionless return experience. And yet, in spite of that, people who buy don't return their merchandise. This is all an example of commitment and consistency. So how do you take advantage of it yourself? Well, you can try to get people to commit early on, either verbally or in writing. And if they're selling a product, even if you're selling a product in very, very small quantity, you've already succeeded in converting that customer from a trier to a buyer. And remember to showcase their choices to the public. So now they're accountable to everyone else, and then make future marketing efforts consistent with that previous statement. And another good thing you can do is if you're trying to build support for a project or with your internal stakeholders or your customers, try to get their opinions and their commitments and their thoughts early on. They'll stick by those principles and you can remind them of it throughout the process. How do you defend against it? Well, before agreeing to a course of action, even at a preliminary level, think about the consequences of your decision. Because the commitment and consistency principle has been proven to have long-lasting effects. Things you say about yourself today can have consequences years into the future. Okay, part 3. Imagine you have some friends and you're going to go out partying for the evening, and there's 2 clubs across the street from each other, except one club has no lineup, and then the other club has a lineup like this. Which one are you more likely to go to? Chances are you're going to go to the busy club. And clubs have known this for years and always build a line. Why? Because we feel reassured and safer making a decision if we know that others have made the same decision. It's interesting that in France in the 1800s, they started to hire people called claques to sit in the audience. And what claques would do, and they'd be paid a different amount, they'd clap, they'd swoon, they'd whistle, or they'd yell for an encore. And this evolved to be today's laugh track. And even though no one likes a laugh track, I've asked people, do you like a laugh track? No one likes a laugh track. But in spite of that, it's been proven in study after study to be extremely effective at people rate their merriment higher, rate the humor higher, and ironically, it works best on the worst jokes. It's the same reason why buskers and bartenders salt their tip jar. It's all social proof. And the social proof is the tendency to see action as more appropriate when others are doing it. And this can have powerful effects. For example, there was an interesting study done by Albert Bandura with kids who have a really, really deep fear of dogs. And even the cutest, most lovable dog would look like this to them, and they'd be deathly frightened of them. What he did is he showed them a video of other kids playing with dogs. And what it proved was really interesting is after watching a few minutes of a video, they were ready. 67% of the kids who had a deathly phobia of dogs were ready to get in a playpen with a dog and remain confined there. This effect works even better when there were more kids shown and the kids were more similar to the subject. So this is the same principle about why this sign is not nearly as effective as this sign. So how can we take advantage of it? Well, one great way is shares and trending. Here's a great example from Mashable. So what they show is they show the number of shares, and they also show a trend line. So we can see what's popular, and we can see what people like, and chances are that's the first article we're going to click on. No one does this better than Amazon. And this is just a snippet of a web page, but look at what they do at the bottom of a product page. First, they show you what other items do customers buy after viewing this item. Then they give you customers' reviews and ratings. Then they show you more average customer reviews for the product that you're looking at. They also show you what other items people have bought, and they give you ratings for that. And this is so addictive. When you start looking at one product, you find yourself looking at more and more and more. Has anyone else experienced this? Because I have many times. Another thing you can take advantage of are customer testimonials. You'll often see these on home pages and beneath forms because they are really effective. Remember, this is even more so if we can recognize ourselves. So if your product or web service is appealing to, let's say, to CTOs, then what you would want to have are testimonials from other CTOs. Of course, this becomes a lot easier to take advantage of today because of social media. So what you can do is take a look on your social media channel and find responses you really like and feature them on your home pages. It's much easier to collect testimonials. An even deeper experience that you can offer your customers is by going one step further and integrating customer testimonials and case studies to give confidence to your customers. A case study goes a lot deeper because a customer can really explain the experience and change that your product has had for them. Something really interesting is products like this that you can take advantage of, platforms like this. This is Revu, and Honda did a great experiment in Europe where what they did is civic drivers and potential civic buyers could then talk to current civic owners to ask about their experience, and the results were overwhelming. This is also from Revu, but the idea of social informatics. They just make it so much more emotive and emotional to connect with those information points. And of course, one company has been doing this for years and years, which is, of course, the Golden Arches, billions and billions served. I think I'm getting old because I remember when this was millions and millions. Anyone else? The other thing you can show is number of users, and I find that Basecamp does a fantastic job of this. Look at this. Just last week, 5,622 companies signed up for Basecamp. Another great example. Last year alone, Basecamp helped over 285,000 companies finish more than 2 million projects. This is really, really persuasive stuff. So social proof. There's so many different forms of social proof you can take advantage of. You can take advantage of experts, gaining the approval from credible experts in a relevant field. Celebrities, we transfer what we like about celebrities, whether they're paid or unpaid, and the qualities we like to the product. Users get approval from current and past users to show through ratings, reviews, and testimonials. And the wisdom of crowds, approval from large groups and other people, and of course peers, approval from friends and the people you know. Remember that people who are trying to decide if to go with your product or not, they have a lot of doubt about you. So social proof does a lot to help them overcome their doubt and choose to go with your product. How do you defend against this? Well, look, don't follow the herd. You have to decide for yourself, is this the right product or the right choice for me, or am I choosing it just because it's popular? Part 4, there was a really interesting study done in Canada in politics. And what it found was 2.5 times as many voters vote for attractive candidates. And in fact, what's more interesting is not only do they vote for attractive candidates, but 73% of Canadian voters deny that they're doing this, and only 12% even suggest the possibility that they allow that to influence them. But the reality is it has a massive effect on us. Likability is a powerful influencing factor, even in the case of Jean Chrétien. We're more likely to be influenced by people we like. And why is that? Because we feel we have a connection to them. We feel that we're alike and that they have our best interest in mind and share a common perspective with us. That's probably a really big reason, and it's been exploited for years, but remember the Tupperware parties of the 1950s. Why were they so effective for so long? Because here you are, your attendees are all friends. Your defense mechanisms are not up like they are with a stranger or a salesperson. So our defenses are down, and we're really receptive to the pitch, and conversion rates are really, really high. I don't know if you know this man. He used to live in Detroit. His name is Joe Girard. And while Joe Girard was in the car industry making an astonishing sum of money that you'd think he was an executive, he was in fact just a car salesman. But not just any car salesman. The Guinness Book of World Records rates him as the best salesman in history. In fact, he would sell 5 cars and 5 trucks every single day of his job. And when asked what is his trick, what is his formula, how does he do it, he says, well, I do just 2 things. First, I give a fair price. Not the best price, just a fair price. And second, I give them someone they like to buy from. And that's it. How can we take advantage of it? Well, the first way is we can go to celebrities that we know our customers like. Here's an association that Sobeys made with Jamie Oliver. Jamie Oliver is a really likable guy. He's concerned with nutrition, with good food, with good taste, and with good value. And by featuring him on their website and showing his recipes, and by connecting with him, they are extending the values that people perceive in Jamie Oliver to their own brand and their own product. GoPro did a fantastic job of this by connecting with NHL players, and here we see Sidney Crosby skating around. All of his action and trick shots are caught in a GoPro. There's a great brand strategy and a good connection here. Another great thing you can do is make your company personal if people don't know you. Apple does not release a product without Johnny Ive talking about it and showing himself as part of the product. Here's a great example from Shoe Dazzle and their chief designer, Rachel Zoe. And in fact, other agencies in town do this really well as well. Tian and Lax, while they're not in business anymore, I really loved what they used to do. They'd show their whole team and you'd see how likable, approachable they are, and it would lend so much brand authenticity to Tian and Lax. Of course, it's important that if you are creating a product or a brand, that you have to be able, your customers need to be able to see yourself in the product. And there's no question you are a certain kind of hipster if you are visiting this website and buying from this company. Same is true from Zara. You are a certain type of person. You will see yourself a certain type of way if you're going visiting this website. But they go one step further. Not only can you see yourself, but they're tying social links because they're recognizing that if customers can tell their friends about the products they just found on their site, those friends will be influenced. Fab does a great job of it as well. And in fact, there's other services like Stuck, who recognize how powerful this is, and this lets you graph to your social graph to your friends and ask them, which product should I buy, the pink bag or the blue bag, and they'll help you out. Of course, not to be discounted, one part of likability is visuals and aesthetics. Things need to look pretty. They need to look good. They need to look finished. Those qualities transfer to your brand. So the reality is, if your products and your website look like this, you may be in for a bit of trouble when you're trying to win likability. So liking. There's many aspects to liking. There's physical attractiveness, which we discussed. There's this similarity. You want to behave like a friend, not a brand, and show them that they can relate to you. Compliments. Have a voice. When is the last time an app complimented you? It would be great. Take advantage of that. Open up your weather app and say, hey, you look great today. Contact and cooperation. Fight for the same cause as the customers. Put yourself on the same side as them. And also, like any group, any meetup group here, if we were to go out for a drink after, like people kind of associate with like people. If I find out you're from the same place I am, we have something in common, it starts a conversation and makes it easier for us. Employ these same tactics for your brand or for your product. And conditioning and association. Associate your brand with the same values that you want to communicate and you want your consumers to see in you. So how do you defend against this? When you feel tempted to buy a product or sign up for a service, ask yourself, have you fallen under the spell of a particularly likable salesperson? Are they being too complimentary? Really ask if this is right for you or if you just like the person who's selling it to you. Part 5, most people have heard about the Milgram experiments. I'm going to try to go a bit quicker here. And the Milgram experiments, if you're not familiar with it, subjects were called into a laboratory setting. Now, they didn't know that it was fake, and they thought it was real, and what they were given was a machine, and the machine had a number of switches on it. And every time they flipped a switch, there was a subject in the next room who would get electrocuted. And each switch that got flipped, the electrocution was more and more and more volts, and you could hear excruciating pain and see it in the window. And even though you were the test subject, and it hurt, and it was excruciating to flip those switches, what they found, to everyone's shock and amazement, they kept flipping the switches and turning up the voltage. And the reason why? It came out just because the person asking them to do it was wearing a lab coat. So strong is our built-in respect for authority. People tend to follow authorities, and we're taught from a very young age that obedience to authority is right and disobedience is wrong. And even tiny little things like uniforms, accessories, or gadgets can lend a lot of authority and can persuade us to accept what people say. And this has been known in the entertainment industry for a long time. For example, imagine you're out with a group of 8 friends for a dinner party, and you go to the waiter and you order today's special. Waiter looks around for her manager and then leans in and whispers into your ear, actually, that dish is not very good. Could I recommend either B or C? They're really tasty tonight. Instantly, they've established a lot of authority and respect with you. Now, it might seem counterintuitive to have them say, don't take that dish. But the reality is when they come back later and they try to say, hey, would you like to take this wine with it? It's fantastic. Or would you like this dessert? They know you are now more receptive to them and they'll be able to sell you more. And they know that the bigger the bill gets, the greater their tip. So how can you take advantage of it? Expert creation. If you have expertise or scientific expertise in your business, show it off. Display content from professionals and use credentials, just like this example from Herbalife. Or you could do a curation of experts. It's one thing to have cookbooks. It's another, or cookbooks on French food, but it's another one to have one by Jacques Pepin, the best French cook there is. Of course, you can also have curation by experts and influencers. And no one has been more effective at this than Oprah and her book club. She has sold more books than any bookstore in the world. Sponsor events like Rangle.io does, and they show off their expertise. You can also demonstrate thought leadership in the form of white papers, research documents, collected data, and even case studies. Consumer packaged good products like Ensure do a fantastic job. The whole thing about Ensure is that they want to say that they have a healthy product that's great for your lifestyle and can help you with particular medical ailments. So what they do is not just talk about their product, they have the opportunity here to ask a nutritionist. So they will instantly connect you with a third-party nutritionist to talk about their product. Talk about giving credibility towards and trust towards your brand. Of course, some brands do a great job because they sell sophisticated products and you need help. So Dell offers you the ability to talk to an expert. But there's one company, and only one company, that any day of the week you can call them and talk to a genius. Another thing you can do, I've never had a Wagamuffin. Have you guys ever had a Wagamuffin? No? It's a UK muffin company, but they keep winning all of these awards, like the best cupcakes in London and all these different competitions. Well, if you have those badges, show that shit off. Then the other opportunity is apparently they have a big fan. Richard Branson wrote a blog post on how much he likes Wagamuffins. Well, amplify that everywhere you can. Also, what if you have artisanal expertise? Show that off. Here's Bomb Bicycles. I mean, they're handmade bicycles. There's real expertise there. Whether it's that or baked goods or something else, show off your artisanal expertise because that's what makes you special. And of course, you can leverage trust seals. People may have doubt or may have fears about transacting with your product or using your product. Trust seals allow you to leverage that trust that they've seen elsewhere and have a greater opportunity to adopt them to your product. So there's many ways to use authority. Demonstrate what you're good at, and people will show you due respect. Now, while these tips are meant to activate an almost automatic human response, they will backfire if your product isn't up to standard. When people believe and trust your brand authority, they will also have higher expectations of your ability to deliver. So how do you defend against this? Carefully note, are you responding to a trigger because it's an authority figure? Are you merely responding to the symbols of authority, or do you really have trust and faith in that product? Part 5. There was a really interesting experiment with cookies. People were given 10 cookies, 2 cookies, and then a third group was given 10 cookies, had 8 taken away, so they were just left with 2. Each of these 3 sample groups was asked to rate their cookies. And what do you think the result was? Anyone? The group that had the 8 cookies taken away rated their cookies as the tastiest, even though they were all the same cookies. And the reason for that is the scarcity principle. And the principle states that opportunities seem more valuable to us when their availability is limited. And fans of behavioral economics will see how this ties into the concept of loss aversion. The fear of loss is always greater than the desire for gain. So how can we take advantage of this? Well, sites like booking.com are just fantastic at it. The first thing they do is if you're looking at where to go and you see, oh, I love this Island Seas resort, but they only have 2 rooms left. Okay, I better act. But what they do is they really apply the pressure because they also tell you there's one person looking at this resort right now, so you better act quickly. The other thing that creates is competition. So here's great. eBay does social proof. So they'll show you how much time is left. That gives you a lot of pressure, but they're also showing you how many other people you're bidding against. So you know your likelihood of acting, you have to act now. Limited time tactics work really, really well as well. Amazon does this all the time. For example, today's deals, or they also have seasonal deals. So St. Patrick's Day, special deals just for St. Patrick's Day that people take advantage of. Another limited time tactic is Tiger Direct. They do a great job. They do exactly what we saw before, but they add this pressure of this great big countdown clock up in the corner. Even if your merchandise is out of stock, that's a great opportunity for you guys. Because here is an example of a shirt that's out of stock, but what they're doing is they're recognizing that showing it's out of stock is social proof that this is a good outfit and you may want it, and they give you the opportunity to register for an email so you get updates about that product. Another opportunity is limited editions. People love limited editions. Here's a limited edition shirt designed by humans. But of course, we're all familiar with PSL, pumpkin spice latte. So when it comes around, everyone looks forward to it. And people are so excited by this limited edition drink, which I think you can actually order any day of the year. Correct me if I'm wrong. But they can actually charge more, and people are willing to pay more, believing that it's only available with seasonality. Clearance sales are another great way to tap into the scarcity principle. Have clearance sales. People realize they need to act fast because these items aren't coming back. And Kickstarter does a great job on pre-orders. They know for a limited time, if you pre-order, they can give you a number of benefits. This is the pancake printer. It looks very exciting. Scarcity. So to use with this principle, people need to know what they're missing out on if they don't act quickly. If you're selling a product, limit the availability or the stock and set a closing date for the offer, or create a special edition of that product. How do you defend against this? Well, before you fall for a sales pitch claiming that the product is running out of stock or it's a discounted deal, think again, do you really need this product, or are you just responding to the pressure? Okay, but there's a caution here, guys. Be careful how you use these principles. It's really easy to think you can use them to mislead or deceive people. For instance, to sell products at unfair prices or exert undue influence. But the reality is a good reputation takes a long time to build, but you can lose it in a moment. So I'm begging you, enjoy these principles, but don't be evil. You're all UX professionals, so you do something fantastic every day. You look at a pile of crap and you turn it into a valuable and useful and a good product. So take these. I encourage you, because there's a bias in our field, and there's a bias towards cognitive psychology, where we're worried about color theory, heuristics, button placement, clicks, topography. These are all really important aspects. However, they're very ineffective at creating behavior change and creating better environments that create behavior change for the users. BE is a great opportunity, and by applying the principles of behavioral economics into your work, you'll be even more effective at improving the outcomes for your clients and your users. And so the last secret in the formula, of course, is you applying all of these principles. So I encourage you to learn more about behavioral economics and share your experiments, your successes, and your failures with your colleagues in your community. Today we looked at 6 mechanisms. They're sometimes called Cialdini's 6 principles of influence, but there are hundreds more. And if you are interested in the field, I would recommend that you pick up the book Influence, which talks in great detail about these, the ones you saw today. Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely is filled with fantastic anecdotes about behavioral economics. This whole field really started with Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize, and his book Thinking Fast and Slow is a fantastic read. If you want to get really practical, especially on the UX and research parts of applying behavioral change, this book on designing for behavior change is fantastic. And Drive is fantastic in terms of describing what actually motivates people and what they really respond to. Special hat tip to this site. I found a lot of useful information. And I want to thank you. You guys have been a fantastic audience, and everyone here at Rangle.io who put on this event today. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions? Grab me after. I'll be having a beer or two. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Lanny.